Hi everyone, and welcome to English4U. I'm Pat.
And I'm Mike.
And our article today and tomorrow is about kind of mistakes and what they can do to how people think about you. Now, I can think of one pretty good mistake I made.
Okay.
This is when I was applying for different colleges, and I was supposed to go to a place called Warwick in England and see their very nice university, and I got on the wrong train.
Ooh.
So I was making my own way there, and so I never saw Warwick University. I never visited it.
Oh no!
In the end, I did not make it one of my top choices on my application form.
Oh.
I thought, well, I've never seen their department. How can I make it my first choice? And they asked me, so what did you think on our open day? And I never made it there. So I felt it didn't really affect my life, but I felt pretty embarrassed because I was like, oh, I'm on the wrong train and there's nothing much I can do because this was before mobile phones, really. So there's no one I could call. It was just like, all right, get off the train at the next station, come back the other way, go home. Like, yeah, I didn't make it.
Did you tell people what you did, or did you sort of say, I went there, it was great?
No, I had to tell my parents because I was at home early. They're like, why are you home kind of thing.
So imagine you're in Taichung and you get on a train planning to go to Kaohsiung, and then you end up in Taipei.
Oops.
You went the wrong way. That is kind of embarrassing, but
it's
an
a little
honest
embarrassing
mistake. People do that.
Everybody makes mistakes, as we will find as we read through today's article.
Reading. The Pratfall Effect. Is a little less than perfect the new perfect? It's spring 2010, and in New York, models walk the runway at a high-end fashion show. Suddenly, one of them, 27-year-old Agnes Dean, trips and falls over. What happens next, though, is surprising. Dean laughs and bows, and the audience gives her a round of applause. This is an example of the Pratfall Effect. This is a theory that claims sometimes we like someone more when we see them make mistakes. The way this effect works was shown in an experiment by Yale University. In it, people listened to recordings of 2 interviews with college students. The first had very high grades and was captain of the sports team. The second, meanwhile, only had average grades and was not very good at sports. The listeners were asked which student gave a better impression. Most said they preferred the first. Then, a second recording was played. In it, the same students were heard spilling some coffee. But how did this affect the listeners' opinions of them?
So the article begins by kind of setting us a scene to give us an example of mistakes, really.
Okay.
It starts by saying it's spring 2010, so 9 years or so.
Right.
And in New York, models walk the runway at a high-end fashion show.
Wow.
This does sound fancy. Now, the runway is the long stage that models walk on to show off their clothes. Now, unlike a normal stage, which is sort of one side to the other with the audience in front, a runway goes out into the audience and people are on either side. So that's what a runway is. It's used for models and fashion. We can also use the word runway to talk about airplanes and at airports. That's what they use to run to take off. So there are 2 meanings of the word. They're at this high-end fashion show, so very fancy, very high class. What happens?
Yeah, so she's walking down the runway, this one model, and it says suddenly one of them, 27-year-old Agnes Dane, trips and falls over. Oh, wow. So you're in this big room, all these important, fashionable people, celebrities there. Everyone's got a camera because, of course, this is a fashion show. And this model, probably wearing tall shoes and beautiful clothes, suddenly trips. She falls over her feet and falls down to the ground. She falls over. This is not what models normally do. They're graceful and elegant and walk beautifully. They don't fall over. And this term fall over is basically to go from, standing to, lying on the ground, not on purpose. This was an accident. If your feet get caught in something, if someone pushes you, if something catches you on the knee as you're walking, you might accidentally tip or fall over. As I said, this is not something you plan to do, but it happens to people. It can happen to things too. You know, a tree might fall over in a big storm, or if you hit something with your elbow, it might fall over on the table, spilling your glass of water or something like that. But generally, when things fall over, it wasn't planned, it was an accident, and that thing is now going to have to get picked up off the ground.
Yeah, so this is kind of a bad moment for a model during a fashion show.
Sure, exactly.
But as the article says, what happens next, though, is surprising.
Okay, so what happened? This model there is lying on the ground. Everyone around has got big eyes, and they're probably doing that. So what does she do? It says Dane laughs and bows, and the audience gives her a round of applause. So, of course, she probably stands up first. She laughs at herself, at her own mistake, bows like she sort of planned to do this, but, as a joke. And then everyone just went, wow, she handled that really well. They gave her applause. And what is applause? Applause is basically the sound and the action of people clapping, all right? When people see something good, when they watch a great show, when something impressive or wonderful happens, when they're trying to show respect to someone, they will clap for them. You clap at the end of a concert or a show. You might clap when you're watching a sports event, when one of the athletes scores or does something very skillful. And also you clap just to show appreciation or thanks for people. You do it as a group, and you're doing it because it's easier than everyone walking over and saying, well done. No, if we all give a round of applause, or if we applaud, to use the verb, we're clapping together to show our respect or appreciation for something. But generally, people applaud or give applause when someone does something good.
Yeah.
Not when they fall over by accident and sort of look silly, though.
Yeah. Well, the article says this, or what happened, is an example of the Pratfall Effect. Now, the word pratfall means when someone falls over in a very embarrassing way, often landing on their butt. Now, some famous actors, think of Charlie Chaplin, they would do this on purpose to get laughs. It's funny. But a pratfall is generally the most embarrassing kind of falling over. Now, the word can also be used to mean an embarrassing mistake. But what is the pratfall effect?
Interesting. Well, yeah, it says this is a theory that claims sometimes we like someone more when we see them make mistakes. Interesting. So because she was a beautiful model, she's normally very elegant, she did this, she kind of looked a little bit human, right? She wasn't just a beautiful person with a lovely body, wearing lovely clothes, not talking, we don't know much about her. Suddenly she falls, her face turns red, she kind of smiles because she's embarrassed, but she handles it very well. She looks a little more human, a little more natural, a little more like us, because we all make mistakes too. This is called the Pratfall Effect, and it's a theory, all right? Now, often when we talk about science, we use this term theory. What is a theory? It's a very carefully thought out, logical idea, but it hasn't been proven yet by experiments or by research. It's an idea. Smart people look at the world, they think, you know what? I think I can explain this. And then they come up with a theory. Once they test the theory using experiments, and once other people also test it, then it changes from a theory into a fact. Hundreds of years ago, there were some people like Galileo who had a theory that the sun was the center of the solar system and the earth moved around it. It was just an idea. A lot of people didn't agree with this theory, but of course, over the years, through science, through looking at the planets and measuring, now we know that this theory of the sun being in the center and the planets moving around, it's a fact. It's not a theory anymore, but the theory was the original idea. For example, I just read an interesting theory about McDonald's restaurants and world peace.
Oh, that's interesting.
It's an interesting theory.
Now, here it's a claim. This theory is claiming something. And if you claim something, you say, we think that this is true. I'm telling you this because I say it's true.
So it's true.
Well, not exactly, because a claim still needs to be proved. It needs evidence and support to back it up. Someone can claim something without having to give any evidence. And you go, well, hang on, I'm not sure about that. It's just what people might say. For example, Cuthbert claims that he caught a 100-kilogram fish last weekend.
Does he have pictures of it?
He does not.
Does he have the fish?
He does not.
Was someone there watching while he did it?
There was not.
Interesting. So it's a claim, but it's not a fact.
Okay, now we talked about having a theory and trying to prove it. Now, somebody did actually try to prove this Pratfall Effect idea.
Okay, so this Pratfall Effect, it says the way this effect works was shown in an experiment by Yale University. So someone had the theory, and then people at universities, scientists, researchers, they come up with experiments to test the theory, to see if it's true or if it's not quite accurate, not quite right. What is an experiment? Well, this is a noun. Basically, it's a scientific test or trial. It's carefully thought out. You're trying to test one thing, and you have to do the experiment using different things at different times of day with different amounts or different measurements to really make sure that the experiments will show the same thing all the time. And as I said, if the experiment does show the same thing all the time, that theory then becomes a fact. But experiments are the way to test it. For example, the scientist hopes her experiment will prove that there could be life on Mars.
Interesting.
She's going to try to create a little mini Mars on Earth and show that life could exist.
Cool.
Yeah.
So how did this experiment talk about the Pratfall Effect and what it does?
How do you test the theory?
Well, this is what they did. In it, so the experiment, people listened to recordings of 2 interviews with college students. So in that sentence, we use the word interview. People listen to an interview. And an interview is a meeting between 2 or more people in which a lot of questions are asked. The most obvious one is a job interview where you answer questions to kind of prove that you should be hired for a job. A reporter could also interview you and ask you questions about what's going on, what's happening in your life, and so on. Like in this example, the young journalist was nervous before her interview with Beyoncé. Okay, so we've got an interview with 2 students.
Okay, all right. So let's find out about this interview and what they're trying to show by doing it or by having people listen to the interview. It says the first interview, or the first student, I should say, had very high grades and was captain of the sports team.
Cool.
Wow.
Fancy.
Quite an accomplished student. Really smart, did really well in class, and really good at sports. In fact, a captain of one of the teams.
Okay, so that's one student.
Yes.
The second, meanwhile, only had average grades and was not very good at sports. Okay, when we use average here, we mean kind of typical, the usual thing, the normal thing, not really, really good, but not really, really bad. Basically somewhere in the middle. Okay, so if a top grade is like an A, an average grade might be a B or a C.
Right.
Good enough to pass, but not good enough to make people go, wow, that's cool. Here's an example. Sal may be a student of average ability, so normal ability, but he's definitely the role model for his classmates as being the most hardworking. So his abilities are average. He's not much better or much worse than other people, okay, but he is the most hardworking.
Okay.
So there's our 2 students.
So one's kind of the superstar student who's good at everything, and one is just a normal student, kind of like a lot of other people.
Right.
Now, it says the listeners listening to these interviews, the listeners were asked which student gave a better impression. So basically listen to these interviews, listen to the students and how they speak or what they speak about, and which one gives you the better impression? Which one does it make you say, I kind of like that person. I think they sound nice, or something like that.
Okay, in that sentence, we saw today's grammar pattern, and it's a noun clause. So think of it this way. A clause is a part of a sentence, and it has a subject and a verb, and one or more clauses make up a full sentence. Now, a noun clause is a clause that works in the sentence as a noun. So it can be the subject, the object, or the subject complement. Noun clauses are always dependent, which means they can't be used independently, And noun clauses like this are always introduced with a WH word like where, what, when, or the word how. Here are a few example sentences that explain how it worked. So if a sentence is, what did she say before she left? If we want to use a noun clause to make the same kind of sentence, we say, I don't know what she said before she left. And everything from what she said before she left, that's a noun clause. That's a whole clause, and it is the object of the sentence. Here's another example. Okay, let's see if you can see the difference between these two sentences. Okay, second pair. So our second example is, who is the first speaker? That's something somebody would like to know. If we want to put as a noun clause, we could say, if you come to the meeting early, you'll see who the first speaker is. So who the first speaker is a noun clause. It's the object of the you'll see. Okay. So we're just using it as a noun clause. Sometimes they're a more polite way to ask questions.
Right.
What time is it? I would like to know what time it is. That's one use for a noun clause.
Okay.
So here, the people, the listeners, wanted to know which student gave the best impression. So the which part, that's your noun clause, and we want to know, hey, who sounded good?
That's right. And an impression is basically a feeling, an opinion you get from something right away, right when you meet them, right when you see them, right when you encounter them. When you have an impression of someone, it's not something that you thought about for a really long time. It's not something that you come up with after you know this person for years and years and years. It's something that you come up with right away on first meeting. So, you know, when we get an impression from someone, we first meet them, we shake their hand, we see what they look like, the clothes they're wearing, how they speak, you know, all that kind of stuff. Sure, your impressions can change. You know, you could meet someone who's dressed very poorly and think, wow, this guy probably doesn't have a lot of money. But then if you say, someone tells you, no, he's a billionaire, he just dresses like that, well, of course, your impression would change. But when you first met them, you looked at their clothes. The clothes look kind of dirty and old, so it would be a natural impression to think maybe this person doesn't have that much money. So it's your first sort of natural reaction that you get without thinking or knowing too much about the situation.
Yeah, you can even get an impression of someone or something by hearing about it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Before you see it. You kind of make a very quick judgment.
You hear their voice, you could get an impression of lots of things, how they look, where they're from, that kind of thing.
What happened here when people listen to the interviews, and after this, most, meaning most of the listeners, said they preferred the first.
The star
meaning
athlete,
the first student.
the best student, all that.
Sounds natural, right? You listen to two and go, I like the first guy better. He seems smart, he seems confident, he seems cool. He's giving me a better impression.
Okay, then, in the experiment, then a second recording was played.
Okay, now in it, so in the second recording, the same students were heard spilling some coffee. So it's at the end of the, oh dear, I just did that. So to spill something means to accidentally get liquid somewhere where it shouldn't go. If you're trying to drink and it goes splat, you have spilled something. Maybe you put your drink down too hard and it comes out. So you've spilled it. You could knock the cup over, coffee goes everywhere, you've spilled that coffee. Here's an example. Harvey tripped and spilled the cup of coffee he was carrying. So here we've got this interview, and in this other version, the students, they do something silly. They make a mistake. They spill, like, oh no, I've just poured coffee on myself. Oh.
Okay, so here's the question. But how did this affect the listeners' opinions of them? After you hear the first interview, you think, wow, the star student sounds really great. But then later on, you hear both the students, the star and the average student, make a mistake, spill some coffee. So does this change your opinion? Does this change your impression of the student?
That is a very good question. And it's kind of key to how this idea, the Pratfall Effect, works. Okay, so we're going to have to wait until tomorrow to find out how the changes were made.
Man.
Sorry, we have to keep you excited and thinking, no, I can't miss tomorrow. I've got to read part 2 of the article, okay? Maybe you'll go ahead and do that now, but we will be back tomorrow to kind of explain it all to you. Right now, it's time for us to go to our For You Chat question.
you chat?
So the question is more of a situation here, okay? Imagine you were interviewing the two college students.
Okay, so I'm asking them the questions.
The cool guy and the average guy.
Right.
How do you think you would react to them spilling the coffee?
Ooh.
And would you treat both students the same?
Interesting.
Yeah.
Personally, I would say it depends on where they spill the coffee.
Yeah, if they spill it on me, I'm likely to be less happy.
If I'm wearing my brand new white pants, I would be really unhappy. If I was wearing my black pants, I might not be so unhappy. If it was iced coffee, that might be better than hot coffee, which could burn. And of course, if they spilled it all over my brand new computer and it started to smoke and spark and die, I would have a very bad impression of the students. So it would kind of depend on how they spilled it and where they spilled it.
You know what? I would base my response on how the student reacted. Okay?
Oh, okay.
Now, suppose if the student kind of spills it and then apologizes,
I'm really
kind
sorry.
of quickly cleans it up and then kind of gets on with the interview, I'll think, hey, you can kind of handle a pressure situation.
Sure.
You can sort of deal with it. If someone is completely breaks down and they stop giving a good interview, no matter who they were to start with, the cool guy or the average guy, I think, okay, obviously you can't take it when something bad happens.
Right.
So that would give me maybe a more negative. So for me, it's not about spilling the coffee, it's about how they react to doing it.
And of course, if they spilled it and didn't seem to care at all, you would have a very bad impression of this person.
Too, yeah. Well, obviously you don't care about mess but the fact that your behavior has affected me.
Right.
What does that say about you?
Exactly, yeah.
Well, there we go. We've sort of discussed a different kind of idea here. Would the Pratfall effect have kind of affected our thinking? First, we'll need to know exactly how the Pratfall effect works, and we'll find out tomorrow. Join us then for part 2 of the article. Bye for now.
Take care.
The Pratfall Effect. Is a little less than perfect the new perfect? It's spring 2010, and in New York, models walk the runway at a high-end fashion show. Suddenly, one of them, 27-year-old Agnes Dean, trips and falls over. What happens next, though, is surprising. Dean laughs and bows, and the audience gives her a round of applause. This is an example of the Pratfall Effect. This is a theory that claims sometimes we like someone more when we see them make mistakes. The way this effect works was shown in an experiment by Yale University. In it, people listened to recordings of 2 interviews with college students. The first had very high grades and was captain of the sports team. The second, meanwhile, only had average grades and was not very good at sports. The listeners were asked which student gave a better impression. Most said they preferred the first. Then, a second recording was played. In it, the same students were heard spilling some coffee. But how did this affect the listeners' opinions of them?
Vocabulary Review.
Theory. The scientists formed a new theory of the way the disease affected people's brains. Claim. The student claimed that his dog had eaten his homework, but no one believed him. Experiment. We did a science experiment to learn more about the effects of water on metal. Interview. The new president gave many interviews that were shown on television. Average. Amanda is quite tall, but her older sister is of average height. Spill. One time, I spilled water all over my computer and destroyed it.
智慧小补帖
Runway. Applause. Pratfall. impression.
以上节目是由活用空中美语制作。活用空中美语杂志，请洽询全国各大书店。如欲索取试听教材，请来电02-2364-4000 02-2364-4000，或上网查询，网址是 www.english4u.net www.english4u.net